Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Robbie Sassoon. I'm the director of Crossroads. Crossroads offers support to over 1,000 teens and young adults each year. We do this through individual therapy, crisis intervention, creative arts, our GED program, our School of Rock Music program, and Open Moadon, our employment support, including a fantastic apprenticeship program that we run for 14 to 16-year-olds in the summer, and more recently, our leadership program. This session this evening, conversation about eating disorders with parents of teens, is the fourth program we're running for parents of teens and young adults. Registration hit close to 150 people. It's a new way we're looking at teens and young adults and how important it is that we not only offer direct support to our clients, but also support to those closest to them, their parents. If you're not familiar with Crossroads, feel free to look at the website. I'm going to share it in the chat. And if you'd be interested in offering any type of support to Crossroads programs in general, including this one, or others like this, I'd be happy to share that link as well in the chat. This evening, we have three amazing speakers and mental health professionals. The way tonight is going to work is that each speaker is going to speak for 10 to 15 minutes. That will be followed up by an open panel and Q&A. I'm going to be the only one asking the question. So as I said earlier, if you have a question, send it to me in the chat. And if we're able to, we'll definitely include it in the Q&A. I received a lot of questions. We received a lot of questions from the registration, and we're definitely going to include many of those as well. Before we start, I just want to thank Mira Zarnest, one of our social workers at Crossroads, who really played a pivotal role in coordinating the evening. So thank you, Mira, for making this happen. All right, we're going to start with Lisa Cooper. Lisa is a friend of Crossroads for many years, a CBT therapist specializing in eating disorders. And she's going to be speaking about the understanding current eating fads and when to be concerned and how not to panic. So,
okay. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to start with two things to let everybody down. I will not be talking about eating fads. Sorry, Robbie, because quite frankly, I actually don't know that much about the latest eating fads. I probably think that TikTok is the best place to go if everyone wants to know the latest eating fads. And the other thing that I'm probably going to do for everybody is cause everybody to panic. So I'm just putting that out there before I start. I looked at a lot of the questions that were given, and I felt like the most helpful thing for me to do in this short period of time, because this is obviously a workshop that could take hours, is I was thinking I was going to focus on warning signs and things to look out for if people are concerned about their children, and also how to help them children not develop bad eating habits or for things to go in towards an eating disorder. So the big question for tonight is, I'm not going to go into the different types of eating disorders. The thing that I'm going to talk about tonight is, how do we know when we should worry? Okay, so everything that I'm going to say, warning signs and things to look out for, you've probably noticed either in yourself or in your kids, and it is cause for concern, but how do we know when our children need to seek help? Okay, so the most important thing is that eating, in order for it to be an eating disorder, and we've spoken about this, I was actually at Crossroads a few weeks ago, and this is one of the things that we focused on, the difference between disordered eating and dieting and things like that to an eating disorder is when your child or whoever it is has lost control. What does that mean? It means they're no longer enjoying things in their life. So all their food concerns, weight, shape, am I fat? Do I look this? I don't want to have this food. I don't want to have that food, is basically taking over their life. That's how you know it's a cause for concern. So Going on a diet, yeah, firstly, diets are bad. Nobody should be going on a diet. Ashera will talk to you about that, I'm sure. But if you have a child who said, oh, I'm going on a diet, doesn't mean they're going to have an eating disorder. It probably means it's not going to work because diets don't necessarily work, but it's definitely something, a cause for concern if you start to see that they're being very, very rigid and that diet is taking over everything else in their life. So again, when it's controlling every aspect of their life, it's more of an eating disorder. If they say, oh, I'm not having breakfast or I'm going to go on a diet, but then they're having chocolate and they're not so rigid with it, you don't necessarily need to be worried at that point. The things that are really important to look out for with eating disorders. So you have like a teenage kid living in your house. And by the way, I'm being very specific and I'm not saying a teenage daughter because it can happen to teenage boys as well. And there's a really, really, really high increase, much more so than girls, in the prevalence of eating disorders in males. And this is something to really, really also look out for because they are often not ignored, but people don't necessarily recognize that. So that's really, really important. The first thing that tends to happen is you might notice, and again, this is dramatic weight loss or dramatic weight gain. This is very hard to notice with somebody that you're living with every day. People don't tend to see that. Sometimes you'll get feedback from other people, your daughter's lost weight, your daughter's gained weight. So that's something to look out for. One thing, and again, I keep mentioning Ashera because I think I'm going to lie, scales are a very bad thing. Okay, Ashera's like nodding. So if there's one tidbit that people could take away from tonight is no scales should be found in the house for anybody. Nobody ever needs to go on scales. If you need to know your weight, you can go to a doctor, you can go to a nurse, you can go to like some super farms have scales, I think. There should not be scales at home. All the kids are obsessed with weighing themselves. So that is the first thing that should not, be in the house at all. If you do have scales and you've noticed that your kid is on the scales a lot, obsessively, firstly, throw the scales away. Secondly, if they're talking about weight and gaining weight and you really don't think they have, that's a cause for concern. Another thing that I really want to highlight tonight is all the apps that people use to manage their weight. Again, sorry, Ashera, I don't know if you're gonna but these are like my pet peeves. So the one that comes to mind the most is MyFitnessPal. If your daughter or son is constantly talking about managing their food and their calories and what they've eaten and their exercise and their this, and also, by the way, Fitbits and step counts and all these things, these are not helpful in any which way for anybody, especially for somebody who has an eating disorder. Now, it's not to say that they're going to give somebody an eating disorder, but they are generally bad for everybody. And Ashera can correct me if I'm wrong, and Yael, I don't know what they think about that, but these are bad things. Okay, generally with eating disorders, how do we know that we've got a problem? So there's things like refusal to eat certain foods. And it's not like I just don't want chocolate. It's I don't want to have any sugars. I don't want to have any carbs. They've got rid of whole food groups. That's already a cause for concern. You see weights dropping. They've got rid of whole food groups. It's something to think about. Anxiety about gaining weight. They're talking about being fat all the time. They're really not fat. You don't see any change in the weight. If anything, you see them losing weight and they're very preoccupied with their weight, with their shape. This one's lost so much weight. That one looks great. I look fat. I'm disgusting. All those things. Again, in isolation, each one of these things does not make it an eating disorder. It's a lot of these things together. That is the time when people need to start thinking, okay, we have a problem. Food rituals. So like they start to say things like, you know what, you start to realize that they're eating a lot of chewing gum, they're doing strange things with the food on their plate. So that's something to look out for. Also, I've just eaten. I don't want to have supper because I just ate at my friend's house. I don't want to do this. I can't come out with you for dinner tonight because I'm going to see other friends. Again, like trying to avoid any type of eating with friends, with family is a worry. Excessive rigid exercise. This is another thing to really highlight. Exercise every single day and very, very rigid, meaning that they wouldn't see a friend, that they'd have to exercise, is bad. Whilst exercise is very good for you, it's very bad if it takes over all aspects of your life. Again, I'm not sure how many, I see a lot of patients that have gym memberships from a very young age. I'm not sure what I feel about that. I don't know if that's so helpful. again, exercise is important, but I think that going every single day is something to keep an eye on. Okay, withdrawal from usual friends and activities. You start seeing them spending a lot of time in their room. They're on social media a lot. They talk about things in a very negative way, not only their weight and their shape. And in general, their attitudes are indicating that something is not right. So now what do we do? So you've decided that there's a problem. You're concerned. What are we going to do about it? So the thing that I always say to people, there's two things to do. If you're worried that your child's losing a lot of weight, so the best way to know that, if you don't have scales at home, is to go to a doctor. The problem is sometimes doctors really don't deal with this in the right way. So if you are going to take your child to a doctor, I would say straight up name the elephant in the room. I think parents spend a lot of time avoiding this topic and they don't know what to say, and you cannot do any harm by addressing it straight on, because early intervention for eating disorders is the most important thing. And the sooner you get help, the better the prognosis is. So you not wanting to say the wrong thing is actually going to be much worse in the long run than if you say something, you name it, and the child is very upset about it, but at least you can try and help them to get help. So I would suggest two things. If you've noticed all these things, I would say before you jump to having to see a therapist, unless your child straight out opens up and says, I have an eating disorder, I'm really worried, then you would decide to do that. But I would take them to the doctor to have weight done, a full bloods. But even before that, and again, I'm sure Cheryl will speak about this, I would say, listen, if you want to change your diet and you want to do things in a healthy way, let's talk to a dietitian about it. And I wouldn't even focus on weight loss, weight gain, anything like that, just changing healthy eating habits. And I would then recommend going to an eating disorder specific dietitian, because they understand much more about the nuances around the problems with weight loss and weight gain in eating disorders. Because some dietitians, again, everyone's very, very experienced, but they might say, okay, yeah, I can help you lose body fat, or I can help you do this. And we don't want any of that. And again, I think maybe I'm wondering if Cheryl will touch on some of these things. So I think it's really, really, really important that you would frame it that way. So I want to help you. I want to try and understand what's been happening for you. And let's go and talk to a dietitian together. Let's see if we can do this in a healthy way. So again, diets, whilst there's lots of evidence, actually, sorry, I'm just going to flip to that. There is a lot of evidence that kids that spend a lot of time dieting have a problem later on in life. And it is a problem that at the age of 12 or 13, they're starting to diet. And I don't think that that's a positive thing to be promoting within the house. And it doesn't mean they're going to have an eating disorder. So everything I'm saying today, there's lots of kids that do all these things, don't develop eating disorders. So these are triggers. They're not necessarily what is going to make somebody have an eating disorder. Essentially, one of the things that definitely causes eating disorders is this wanting to control things around you, okay, in a basic term. And what ends up happening is people with eating disorders will say, I'm not in control, the eating disorder is in control of me. So this idea that we go back to what I started at the beginning with is this loss of control. So get help as soon as you can. Try and start with some kind of experienced dietitian. You could totally go and see a therapist, but kids often don't want to jump into the therapy side of things. So if a dietitian can help and get things under control, I would say that's really helpful. The other ways you can frame it as, let's go to the doctor and have a general checkup. That's another way of doing it. And the doctor can say, listen, you've lost weight since the last time, let's just be on top of it. Or weight's got, by the way, it's not just lost weight, it's also gained weight. It goes both ways. Again, I'm not being specific about the eating disorders because I don't think that's so relevant for now. But I guess if you've noticed both sides of things, if you think your child's vomiting, all these things should not be ignored. I think it should be addressed head on. Robbie, is that about it for time? I'm not sure. No? Hello? Okay, I'll just carry on until I'm stopped. Okay, the last...
No, that's good.
Yeah, can I just say one last thing? Sorry.
Please do. Okay.
one of the things that just for parents to understand is that kids develop their attitudes about food and the way they view themselves and their eating habits and things like that from parents. So the question I hear all the time is, do parents cause eating disorders? And again, no, parents don't necessarily cause eating disorders, but the way they talk about their body, again, Yael, maybe we'll talk about this, the way parents talk about their bodies and their attitudes around food, and carbs are really bad, and I'm on this diet now, and I'm exercising, and I'm obsessing about how I look, that's where things start. And the first thing that kids always tell me when they come for an assessment is they'll say, my mum, blah, 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 or my dad made a comment about me being fat. And these are the things that stick. And it's really, really, really important that us as parents, we try and be really careful about how we speak about ourselves, our bodies, food, our attitudes to food, and dieting. I'll leave it at that. I'm sure Yael will speak more about this.
Okay, we'll get back to you afterwards. I want to invite Yael Solomon, a clinical psychologist specializing treating adolescents in private practice, speaking about the impact of body image, puberty, and social media on teens and how to effectively communicate with teens.
Okay. Hello to everybody. Yeah, so I want to discuss, like Robbie said, we're going to talk about body image and certain tips that both teenagers themselves can do, and also us as parents, what we can do in terms of both our communication with our kids, and also something that Lisa alluded to towards the end of her talk was in terms of our own, leading by example. So just to discuss a little bit in terms of what is body image. So, and body image is our own subjective image that people have about their own bodies, which is usually distinctively different from how it actually appears. This is when we're talking about a negative body image. And a body image is a complex construct, and it's made up and affected and influenced by both our beliefs, our thoughts, our perceptions, our feelings, and our behaviors vis-a-vis how we view ourselves within our own bodies. And that relationship between our own perceptions and our feelings and our beliefs about ourselves and our bodies has a real significant impact, both on our mental health and our physical health, and our relationships. There was actually a study done in 2019, and it was in a journal called The Front Psychiatry. And the study there was saying that 50% of adolescent girls and 30% of adolescent boys dislike their bodies. Then they did it again and asked the same type of questions with adults. And sadly to say, the numbers increased, where 60% of adult women, as opposed to the 50% of adolescent girls, and 40% of adult men, as opposed to the 30% of adolescent boys, disliked their bodies. So this is something that we don't grow out of necessarily. If this is something that we're experiencing in adolescence, we carry it on or have the potential to carry it on to our adulthood, and can even be, it is more prevalent as an adult than as a teenager. So I'm going to get back into that in terms of how we as adults have an impact and can affect our children, both in a negative, but I try to focus on how we can fix and how we can heal it in terms of how can we have a positive impact in terms of changing that course, changing that trajectory. So what are some external factors for teenagers that impact their body image? Well, there's things such as, again, peer pressure and our social friend group in terms of how we look and how we appear. And again, depending on what your friend group is, that has a really big influence, especially in adolescence. When adolescents, the key element is wanting to be part of and identify within a social peer group. Obviously, social media, which I'm going to get into a little bit more in a bit. Celebrities that adolescents identify and idealize has a lot to do with in terms of their own thoughts about their own image, their own body image. Family environment, Lisa, you're referring to that also in terms of healthy eating within the home, how people relate to food, how food is spoken about, right? That old model of you have to clean off your plate, right? You get paid, you know, I remember, I think my grandparents would get paid a dime if, you know, if they cleaned off their plate. Doesn't matter if they liked the food or didn't like the food. If people sit down together for meals together, again, the family culture around food is really significant. Parents' belief about their own body image has a direct impact on a child's perception of their own body image. And again, it doesn't matter what the actual objective image of their body is, because body image is about our own subjective view of it. So if a parent has a positive, healthy appreciation for their body, that is something that will also be passed on to their children. We're our role models in terms of how we relate to our bodies. And the opposite is true as well. If we as parents are worrying about our weight gain, are on ourselves, going on diets, constantly asking, do I look fat in this? Do I look okay? Or being self-deprecating in terms of our own appearance, that is something that speaks volumes to adolescents in terms of how they should value their own body and their own appearance. Okay. And internal factors that also influence body image are such factors as self-esteem, underlying mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, or a history of a trauma, and in very rare cases, body dysmorphic disorder, which I'm not going to get into a lot now, but that is a mental health disorder that focuses on a real preoccupation of defects or flaws within a person's physical appearance. Okay, what can we do? Both what teenagers can do and what we as parents can encourage them to do, and what parents ourselves can do as a way to help influence and encourage good body images. So some treatments that we can help offer our teenagers, and this doesn't, when I say treatment, it doesn't necessarily have to be within the guise of therapy. It can be good, healthy practices that a teenager can take on their own. So for example, there can be some cognitive behavioral approaches, techniques that again can be done on their own or with the assistance of therapy, such as modifying dysfunctional thoughts or cognitive distortions that we like to refer to it as, where we have thoughts or feelings that are dysfunctional, meaning that, I'm fat, I'm ugly, if I'm fat, I'm not going to be liked. If I'm unattractive, I won't have friends and I won't be successful. And it's about recognizing and addressing and monitoring those type of cognitive distortions, and learning how to debate them, learning how to challenge them, and learning how to alter and modify them to healthier, more adaptive ways of thinking. For example, there's a really wonderful workbook called the Body Image Workbook by Thomas Cash that really goes through a step-by-step on how to work on cognitive distortions specifically related to body image issues, and how to, with journaling and with becoming aware of triggers, and debating those cognitive distortions is really addressed in that book, and it's a really wonderful workbook. Another possibility for a teenager to do that they could do also together with the parents is getting physically active. Now, again, there's being physically active, which is an appropriate physical activity, right? Lisa, you were saying that's not that manic over exercising and obsessive quality to it, but rather appropriate physical activity that can help shift the focus from how much do I weigh, how much have I lost, as opposed to building strength and endurance and flexibility, and also an appreciation of what my body can do, as opposed to just being thin, but I can appreciate and develop an appreciation for my body and its ability, and that can really, and it's not only about appearance. And that's something that a parent can do together with a teenager, can encourage to do, can do as family activities, going on a hike, playing outside, like shooting hoops in the backyard, having a game of soccer. It doesn't have to only be like a gym membership, but that could be something healthy, modified, appropriate physical activity. There's another thing that I refer to as media literacy interventions. And this is really about recognizing and focusing on the myth and the deception of social media, where adolescents are, we all are, but adolescents are bombarded by a tsunami of images and messages of what is considered the ideal form, both male and female. Because I appreciate, Lisa, that you mentioned that this is something that boys also suffer from. They just don't speak about it as openly, and they tend to get lost in the crowd. They're not as identified. And I think it's important for us to remember. So by having an open, honest discussion with your adolescent about the deceptions of social media, about I once saw a program about a fashion photographer that used to photograph at fashion houses and Vogue and Cosmopolitan, and he started to go around high schools in the States showing how deceptive the images were, where filters were used and Photoshop and all of, and certain lighting and so on, where the actual image that's presented in the magazines and so on were not actually the real pictures of the real people that we see. We don't get to actually even see the real images. And therefore, this unattainable ideal that's being presented is really poison. It's really toxic. And that's something that can really be discussed with you and your adolescent in terms of monitoring, maybe limiting what sites you see, what TikToks you go on, which celebrities or which YouTubers you choose to follow based on how damaging that influence can be. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. There's also this idea of challenge, avoidance, and body checking. So avoidance is when because we're feeling insecure in our bodies, teens have a tendency to cover up. They may refuse to wear, seasonally appropriate clothing, where let's say it's like really hot out, people are wearing short sleeves, they don't want to wear short sleeves, or if it's time to go, to the pool or to the beach and they don't want to wear bathing suits because they are feeling very uncomfortable and want to avoid being in their bodies. And also body checking, which it could almost be the opposite, where there's this repetitive, almost obsessive nature of measuring and weighing and checking themselves in the mirror. And what you can help work with your teenager, again, if you notice this, is to have an open dialogue and discuss it, right? Like Lisa said, talk about the elephant in the room. It's there. Even if you don't talk about it, it's not going to go away. Open, honest discussion and communication is the best key, because then the teenager knows that they have an address. They know that there's a language for this, there's a context, there's a safe space for this to be spoken about. So you can try to discuss with your teen how to gradually wean themselves off of this avoidant behavior. Maybe they can start with, wearing a t-shirt in their room or in the house, or trying on a bathing suit in, their backyard before going out, with their friends to a pool party. Or trying to gradually limit the number of times each day that they are doing this body checking, measuring, weighing, looking in the mirror, as a way to slowly, gradually getting away from that kind of behavior. Okay, what more can we do? I'm not going to discuss the healthy lifestyle and the eating healthy habits, because Lisa, you addressed this, and I have a feeling Ashira is going to go to that as well. But I feel the most important thing is for us to be honest with our teenagers in terms of what we ourselves go through with our own experience, with our own appearance, and our own issues with our own weight. I don't think there's a person on this Zoom or so on that hasn't had times where they struggle or feel insecure with the way that they look. And our teenagers specifically are very perceptive, and they see and observe and take notes of everything. So if a teenager sees, us being insecure about the way we look, or complaining that something doesn't fit right. And then we want to tell them, look, it's not about your body, your body's beautiful, or it doesn't, it's not, your value is not only wrapped up in your body. They're going to recognize this, this dissonance. We need to have authentic, honest conversations with our teenagers, both in terms of how we feel and our own insecurities, and talk to them about theirs. And then, if necessary, work on it together. Speak about, this is something I'm working on. I want to embrace my body more. I want to embrace my value, as opposed to only my body, but other parts about myself. Another thing that there was a lot of research about is that there's a lot
just
of
about
value.
one or two more minutes.
One more point. Okay. Fathers have a really important role with helping to from getting positive feedback, specifically adolescent girls, positive feedback on their value. Now, they don't need to comment on their bodies as a way to, because again, this age, it's challenging, and it can be tricky and delicate. But girls really benefit from hearing positive feedback about their accomplishments, about anything unrelated to their bodies, about their value. That's something that teenagers really value from. Okay, that's it for now.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Yael. Okay, lastly, I'm excited to hear from Ashira, a registered dietitian with a focus on eating disorders, speaking about how can parents role model positive eating behaviors for their teens.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. What I really want to get to is the positive side of it. Like eating disorders kind of sounds really scary, and everything our teenagers are going through sounds really scary. And I want to kind of focus on the positive part of it for definitely to start with. So first of all, there's a big movement in the world towards mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is one of the things that I think everything is based on with eating. And it's very hard in our day and age to focus on the mindfulness, especially as parents, especially as moms. When you wake up in the morning and your day looks like a long to-do list, and you're like, okay, I'm eating. What can I do while I'm eating? Let me check the news. Let me answer some messages. Let me read some emails. You're always trying to fit in, cramp in as much as possible. So for that, it's really important to make sure that the eating times stay eating times with nothing else going on. When you're eating, to focus on what you're eating. Now, we also have it, being religious Jews, we also have the brachas built in, which I think is a whole movement in the world now, to kind of talk to yourself first and say like, hey, let's focus. What am I about to eat? What is this? So we have that built in, and mindfulness is extremely important. Now, kids watch you eat. They look at the way you eat, and they're going to imitate it. If they see you sitting in front of the TV or watching some sort of movie or answering some sort of email and just grabbing food into your mouth, they're going to do the same thing. You're going to find them doing the exact same thing. If they see that when you are eating, it's always by a table with a proper plate in front of you, cutlery, maybe even a napkin, a glass cup, like invest in this, they're going to copy the same thing. And one day when they have their own homes, they're going to do the same thing. But this is so important for kids to focus on what they're eating. It's also, of course, there's so much research that's been done on how when we look at what we're eating and we actually concentrate on it, we feel better, we feel fuller, we feel happier with the food we eat. So all that boils down to the mindfulness. And the mindfulness is what our kids see us do, they will imitate. So that's number one. Moving on from there, the other big talk in the world of nutrition is health at every size. Health at every size is a great base, and it's a great thing to give over to your kids if you really believe it. If you don't do it. They won't buy it. If you honestly believe that you can be healthy at every size, that if you have a certain genetic makeup and not all bodies should be looking the same, and you could be healthy in that body, give it over to your kids. Show them that you're happy with the way you look. One of the greatest examples are women who dress in black because black is slimming. Your kids hear that, and your teenage daughter will walk into the store and her eyes will go from the pink, yellow flower straight to the black. So move on from the black, okay? Give them that feeling that everybody can look beautiful, everybody, if you treat it well and you make sure to keep healthy, and healthy lifestyle can be fine. It doesn't have to be thin. Which brings me over to the latest and my favorite movement that's going on in the world, which is moving from thin women to strong women. And this is the most amazing thing you could give over to your teenagers and boys, obviously, the men. In order to be beautiful, you don't have to be thin. You want to be strong, and strong comes from the inside, and strong goes out to the outside. And that's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on, look, this is the type of food that's going to make us strong. This is the type of food that's muscle food. Like, if we're talking about name calling on foods, moving over from what we used to call junk food or garbage, yeah, those things sound familiar, to muscle food, brain food, those kind of things. When we say those words, they get ingrained in our kids' heads, and that's what they hear. That's what they're going to hear when they eat a piece of chicken. They're hearing muscle food, brain food. Like, this is what we want them to get from that. And moving on to the exercise. So exercise, Lisa touched on it. Scales for sure, absolutely. No one should have a scale at home. No one. We can't emphasize this enough. If you do, take it to the garbage right after we finish this session. You'll only thank me for that. Gym memberships. I don't think young teenagers should have gym memberships. Gyms are places that encourage a certain look, encourage calorie losing, encourage exercise that are meant for weight loss. We're not looking for that. We're looking to encourage our kids to do healthy sports, sports that are fun, sports that you're not looking at your watch and saying, are these 30 minutes over already? Basketball, baseball, netball, whatever, surfing, swimming, anything they want to do, which is fun, which gets their body moving, invest in that. If you hear from them that they're interested in something, go for it. Let them try out all different types of things so that they find something that they like, that they connect, that they're good at. And this is extremely important. And the same goes for us as parents. If we look at our exercise as, oh, I got to go to the gym, your kid senses that. They see that this is something that you really don't want to do, but it's on your to-do list. If we say, hey, let's spend some time together. Who wants to come out for a walk in the park? Mom, daughter, mom, son. This can be a great bonding opportunity over something that's healthy and will give them positive memories that are attached to exercise. And that's what we really want to create here. So that's about the exercise. There's a lot more to be said about that. Hopefully in the Q&A, because I saw a lot of people ask questions about that, we'll be able to answer some more questions regarding the exercise. Let's move on to the way we eat for 1 minute. So the way we talk about food, the way we feel about food, when we feel depressed and we grab a tub of ice cream and eat the ice cream out of the tub, your kid is getting a very specific message. Ice cream is depression food. Ice cream, when you're depressed, is okay to be eaten directly out of the tub. These are very bad messages to be giving over to the kid. when we do want to do things like this, take into account they're watching, okay? Even if they're not around at that specific moment, this is something that they're going to see that's going to become part of what they are. What I do want to say on the positive side of the food is I encourage parents to make menus together with kids. Kids don't like to be surprised. They don't want to come home and say, oh, what's for dinner tonight? Oh, tonight there's no dinner. Oh, tonight there's pasta. Oh, tonight there's chicken and potatoes. The kid likes to know what they're going to have for dinner. It's so much better, both for us as parents and for the kids, to have some sort of set menu where you know what you're having every day of the week. It helps you shop better. It helps you cook better. And it helps the kid be ready for that. Now, speaking about the kids' involvement in the food, I think that it's really important to encourage kids to experiment with cooking, with baking, with anything they want to do in the kitchen, to take a part in it so that food becomes something that they're familiar with, something that they like, something that's part of them. When you do manage to take your kid shopping to the supermarket or things like that, it's a great opportunity to encourage them and to do some psychoeducation, you know, even if you don't know, even if you're not the most educated person when it comes to nutrition, you know basic things like you know that whole wheat bread is better than white bread. So even something like that, like you see the whole wheat and you see the white bread and you say, hey, look, the whole wheat bread gives you energy for longer, or just something positive like that, which the kid kind of absorbs. So that's about making the kids part of the experience of food. Now, meal times. At the meal, I encourage to offer a wide variety of things, which means, yeah, you said chicken and potatoes is Wednesday. Okay, one day it comes with broccoli. One day it comes with some sort of salad. One day it comes with grilled vegetables. But offer lots of different options, and often without forcing. Force feeding is so the 90s, okay? We don't force feed. We don't force kids to finish everything that's on their plate, because that creates adults who think they need to finish everything that's on their plates. So we want to create a positive atmosphere at the meal time. We want it to be a family time, and we want it to be a time where we're not picking on individual kids. Like, oh, the doctor said you need more iron. You should be eating, even if it's something as simple as that and it's not weight focused, we don't want to pick out on kids. So just in general, hey, this is such a great meal. It has everything. We have the proteins, we have the carbs, we have the vegetables. This is a full meal. This is the way it should look. And creating positive talk, talking about everyone go around the table. Each one can say something good that happened during the day, or you tell the kids, you share something good that happened during your day, or things like that, that create a positive feeling with the mealtime. The other thing that's really important is what we have at home, because at the end of the day, we're very simple. We open the fridge 20 times a day, not expecting to find anything different, because nothing's just jumping into the fridge, but just going over the inventory, you know, am I in the mood of this? Am I in the mood of that? Your kid is also doing that. Okay, that's why fridges break often, because it's open, close, open, close. We want to make sure that in the fridge, they can find a variety of options. So when you're shopping, keep that in mind. Keep in mind fruit, maybe even cut up fruit if you have time for that, vegetables to cut up, kind of keep different foods around. Tupperwares are a nice way to keep it around so that they can see what's in there. Sometimes when you keep it in a pot or in a tin foil and you cover it, it's like, okay, each one comes into the fridge and has to uncover it. Oh, I'm not in the mood of that. Shove it back in. You have nice boxes, Tupperware boxes that are see-through and the kid could see what it is, or if you want to label the food, that's even better. But to have lots of options when they open the fridge that they can just take, that are available to them. Same thing with snacks, creating healthy snacks whether it's granola cookies that you could bake together with the kids, whether it's peanut butter, almond butter, all those type of things. Shakes is a great thing to do. Smoothies, kids love smoothies. It's a great way to have them participate, have them taste different fruits that you can mix together. All those things make them part of it. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, and this is something that a lot of people struggle with, is places that you come to where we have endless amounts of food, whether it's a hotel, you're having breakfast at a hotel, or you're going to a restaurant, or you're going to some sort of simcha, and a kid sees, they come with you, you see an endless amount of food. How do you, as a parent, as an adult, react for yourself and for your kid? Do you shovel on the plate everything that can be put on because like it's here, it's free, I paid for it, whatever, it's included, I might as well get the most out of it? You're giving over a certain message. You're giving over a message where this is what you want your kid to see, and they're going to see and copy you. Or if you can look around and maybe take a walk with the kid and see, oh, look, they're offering this, they're offering this. Maybe we can taste some of this. Maybe we can taste some of this. We want to look for a variety, and we want to keep it within respect. So the kid sees, or the teenager sees, that we treat food with respect. This is something that we have a good relationship with. This is something that helps us, whether it's brain food, whether it's muscle food, whether it's growing, all the positive things that the food does for us. And the last thing that I really want to bring up here is creating hobbies for a child. Okay, too many times I have clients that come in with an eating disorder, and my first question that I love to ask is, so tell me what your hobbies are. What do you like to do after school, after work, whatever it is? And too many people don't have an answer to that. They just don't know. What do you mean? I don't know. So when somebody doesn't have a hobby and then they fall into the eating disorder, it's going to be much harder to get them out of it, because that becomes who they are. That becomes their whole identity. We want to create strong kids who have an identity of a hobby, of something that they're good at, something that makes them feel good, a good outlet, so that they don't need to get into the less positive places to create an identity.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Ashira. Thank you, all of you. That was a lot of information. We have a lot of questions here. We'll try to get as many as we can. I'd like to start with one question. When my daughter, I guess this could be son as well, when my daughter asks, how do I look? What is the role of a parent? My authentic response with healthy body image development in mind. How do I navigate responding to a child asking, how do I look? I'm just happy for one of you to jump in there.
So I think that that's something that probably happens often, is asking, how I look. And I think that there's a way where we don't want to ignore the question in terms of, it doesn't matter how you look, you're so, you're intelligent and, and you're successful and you're, we don't want to avoid the question because it's not about hearing them. We want to address the question that's being asked and not, deny the question. But I think there's ways of relating to the question where it's like, okay, how do I look? You could say, that sweater really is really flattering. It really matches, your eye color really nice. Or I really like how you put all of those patterns together. Like you've really created a really unique look for yourself. As opposed to you look really thin, or, or I don't think, that kind of, I mean, obviously we don't want to say anything negative where I don't really think that's very flattering. I think that should not be something that we say, but address the question and recognize that it's a legitimate question for someone to ask, like, hey, how do I look? Like, does this reflect me in a positive way? And I think that that's really the question. And the answer should be about that in terms of what I am seeing in you is someone, whether a sense of style, a sense of flair, a sense of uniqueness, or like a casual look, that is reflecting that is reflecting an expression of who you are as a person, meaning your internal person, and not about you look thin, you don't look thin, that's flattering, that's not flattering. It should be more about the reflection of the internal self to give that person that confidence that that's really the key, and that's what's important.
Lisa, Ashira, do you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I agree fully with that. I think everybody's instinct is to say, yeah, you look really thin. And especially if the child is overweight and she knows she's overweight, that's not helpful in any which way. And your child then isn't going to trust you. So again, speaking about the general, you look great, the colors look good on you, that's really flattering, that looks really nice with your eyes, exactly what Yael said. But I definitely think that all the kids are looking to hear, I look thin. And that's a big part of the problem here. And that's where parents really, really, really need to be careful not to respond to say that outfit makes you look really skinny, because that's not helpful at all.
What about if your child says, do I look thin? Not how do I look?
Well, that I think opens up a whole discussion in terms of, the value of the ideal of the only thing that is positive or is in order to look thin. How much value are we putting on being thin? In terms of, I think, Sherry, you said like every body, right, is beautiful. And the ideal, there is not only one ideal form. And I think that should be addressed. If I had a kid say to me, or one of my own children say to me, hey, do I look thin? I would say, let's sit down. I want to talk about this idea of thin. That's more important than whether you look thin or not. Why, let's talk about why that's the ideal.
Even before that, I would say, sorry to interrupt, Yael, if somebody says, do I look thin? I would say straight back to them, how do you feel in what you're wearing? Like, it doesn't matter whether I think you look thin, it's what do you feel like in that? So if you feel good in that, it looks fantastic. That's the point. If someone's running out the house and you don't have time to sit down with them, I would put it back onto them, basically.
So you're changing, I like though, you're reframing it by saying, if they say to you, do I look thin? You're reframing it by saying, do you feel good in that? So it's like a subtle shift that it's not about thin. It's about, do you feel good in how you look? Do you feel good in yourself? And that's really the message.
Yeah.
Ashira, did you want to add anything?
I think they summed it up.
Okay, super. I'm going to move on. How do I help my child who won't even admit that they have a problem and they refuse to see a therapist?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that. I think that this is a big misconception by a lot of people, that they view mental health different than physical health. Like if your kid broke their arm and they refuse to go to the hospital to get it casted, what would you do? Just sit there and say, oh, okay, you don't want to go? That's okay. No, it's not an option. Mental health is just as important as physical health. So I think that if it's at a place that you think it's a problem and you went to the doctor and you were referred to a therapist or to a dietitian or whatever it is, there's no two ways about it. That's your parenting red lines.
But that, I guess, Ashera, that's like the aggressive approach at the end, and 100% agree with you, but exactly, there are steps before that. So I think if the child, I don't think they need to run to a therapist, because I think kids get really, really scared to be told, oh my goodness, you have to go and see a therapist, because they really, maybe they don't have to. But I definitely think that, you know, we spoke about this, exactly what Ashera said, what we said before, try and take them to the doctor, for the doctor to say, like, this isn't the most healthy approach, see a dietitian, and then if they're refusing, then the parents, I think, have to intervene full force.
Okay, all right, I'm going to continue. It's responding to some of the comments that a few of you made. Isn't getting rid of scales and gym memberships a little extreme? Don't many people, myself included, I hope I'm a healthy person, don't many healthy people have scales in their home and have a gym membership?
I'm going to answer the scales, because
Please.
I genuinely think that they are evil. And I think anybody without an eating disorder will be able to empathize with this, that when you get on a scale, if the number is higher than what you thought, it makes you feel bad. It's very simple. If the number is lower than what you thought, you feel really good. And then that afternoon, you get nervous that maybe the number's a little bit higher. So I'm just going to jump on the scale again to check that the number's still low. And then when the number's gone up, because it's the end of the day, then I get really, really upset. So scales are not helpful in any which way, except in a controlled way, which Ashera, maybe you could talk about this a bit more, where you weigh yourself once a week over a period of time, because weight fluctuates for everybody. Weighing daily is not helpful in any which way. It's not going to give you anything, and it doesn't show you anything.
Not an indication, yeah.
It's exactly. It's not like a scientific way of knowing what your weight does, because everybody's weight fluctuates. The only way to know that is over a long period of time, once a week. Ashera, I mean, I don't know if you agree.
I think that weight should be one of those things for your well check. Like if you want to go twice a year to the doctor just to get an overall, see that your weight is good, get a CBC, just a general blood test or whatever it is, fine. I don't think scales are necessary for more than that. They shouldn't be a home object.
Right. And all right. I'm gonna. You mentioned before about the gym memberships. Don't many healthy people go to the gym?
But why should it? I think we're talking specifically about teenagers.
Kids,
You know,
exactly.
I mean,
So many healthy young people go to the gym?
I think this is a very new thing where, I mean, I still get very shocked about it, that parents pay for kids to have a gym membership. To me, it's really, really, really surprising. Maybe it's showing my age, but exactly what Ashera said, in my day, it was you did sports. Now, not every kid likes sports. I totally understand that. But there's other healthier ways. A 13-year-old kid should not having to go to the gym, because everybody else is, or because they feel that you have to. And I think it's a really, really, really
Okay.
thing to promote.
Okay, but 13 is the very beginning of being a teenager.
Even 14.
What about a 17 and an 18 and a 19-year-old, a young adult?
Listen,
Well, I think
again, sorry.
No, go ahead, Lisa. I'll go.
No, I
don't
was
wanna-
going to say, if it's done in a way that they're using it, you know, a few times a week, yeah, fine. I don't think that that's a problem. But I generally don't think that the gym memberships in teenagers are used in a healthy way. Sorry, Al.
I agree with you. I think that if we're trying to encourage bodies, again, all shapes and sizes, and it's about what my body can do and is capable of doing in an empowering, healthy fashion, I don't think the gym culture is something that supports that type of message. And although in a gym, and I've been to gyms where they have, like in the summer, they have programs for younger children and their groups, it's very isolating in terms of the activities that you do. I mean, you might be in classes, but it's very individual and it's very isolating. And I think that we can encourage adolescents, again, because of the developmental stage that they're in, that has a lot to do with socialization and identity, that they can be doing activities, healthy activities within a group setting outside of a gym. Whether it's joining a sports team, and if that's not their thing, if you've ever gone to skate parks in Jerusalem or so on, it's an identity in and of itself. You're a skater, that's like a whole group. You play soccer, that's a whole nother type of group. It comes with an identity, and it's a healthier form of exercise. Now, yes, you could be like a workout nut and be, but again, it's the wrong type of message that's being propagated in gyms that we don't really want to support.
Okay. How to differentiate? Some of you spoke about picky eating, or alarming, eating behaviors. How to differentiate between picky eating and alarming eating behaviors?
I mean, I'll say, and I guess Ashura can probably add to this as well, and Yael, I think it's when they can't drop it. And I know that sounds like a really strange thing to say. It's when basically that if you were to offer them a piece of cake and they would be absolutely shocked by it, and they're very, very rigid and they stick by it 24/7. And again, like what we said, it's controlling them. That is, everybody eats very funny. I think nowadays that if you asked half your friends how you eat, you would be shocked. It doesn't mean that that's an eating disorder, but it does mean that if you went out for someone's birthday, everybody would have a share in the cake. I think to me, it's when it becomes rigid and they can't drop from the diet. But I don't know, Ashura, if you had something.
I mean, definitely, I wouldn't be alarmed too fast if there's nothing else going on besides for the picky eating. If the kid is happy, if they're participating in activities, if they're joining social events, I wouldn't be worried about it. And especially if the picky eating has been going on for years, that's the kind of kid they are, or if it's something that you have a few picky eaters or you yourself are a picky eater, all those things are to be taken into account. If you see a change that's going on and affecting other areas, that's alarming.
Yeah, also picky eating is different from trying to do it to lose weight. I think that's the big distinction there as well, that you have exactly what you said, lots of fussy kids and they don't eat this and they never ate this and they never ate. I ask this question all the time. Did you ever eat this in the past? And if they say, I ate that in the past and I don't eat it now, that's not a picky eater. If they say, I never liked pasta, I haven't eaten it ever in my life, that's a picky eater. I think that would be a distinction as well.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point, because that's showing versus picky eating and starting to demonstrate behaviors of restrictive behavior. So I think that's a good point that you made.
Okay, I received a question that said this: if my child was an alcoholic, I would not have any alcohol in the house.
That's a good question.
I'm trying to use this statement and not have any cakes or junk in the house. It is not working. What's considered enabling in this situation?
so I think it's like comparing apples and oranges, because alcohol and drugs, they have no good parts of them.
Well, yes, prescription drugs, if prescribed by a doctor, and
food is necessary. It's a necessity. It's part of your everyday life. It's part of what should be part of your everyday life. We can't take that out. It's not going to work. And if you're talking specifically about, snacks or sweets or things like that, I'm not big at going extreme. Because if they don't have it available at home, they're going to have it available at school. They're going to trade their healthy sandwich for licorice, and you're not getting anywhere. So I think that everything should be in moderation. And most of all, just education. Like, what are you putting into your body?
But also there's a fundamental difference. Somebody who cannot stop themselves from eating sugar needs to be taught and learn how to control themselves around sugar. Somebody who cannot stop drinking alcohol cannot be taught that, which means they cannot drink alcohol or take drugs ever in their lives if they are an alcoholic. And I know a lot of people say that you can have an addiction to sugar and you can have an addiction to this. It is different. And I think that, you know, we don't call it a food addiction. That is not what it's called. It's called a food disorder for a specific reason, because you need to learn how to manage yourself around food, not having cakes and chocolates and things like that. By the way, it's part of the work that we do within this, the treatment is learning how to control yourself around foods that you really, really, really like. An alcoholic will never, ever, ever be taught how to do that because physiologically they can't. So I think it's very, very important, exactly what Ashura said, apples and oranges completely.
Okay. What's the impact of having a family member or a close friend who has an eating disorder? I guess I have some follow-up questions. Maybe I'll get to them after. What's the impact of having a family member or a close friend? Could that impact someone's? Does it make someone more vulnerable to get it? You know, to have difficulties or challenges themselves?
I mean, I guess it depends. Is the question, is it genetic? I guess, is that what somebody's
I think that's a separate question. There's two.
Okay.
I think like, is it contagious?
I mean,
I think the contagious is more of the question, but I'm curious if there's any information about the genetic as well.
I mean, listen, we know a lot of the time that a friendship group will all be obsessing about something and everybody will start maybe trying to obsess about their weight or their shape or exercise. And most of the kids will like get bored of that after a while. It's not that if one kid has an eating disorder, everybody's going to get an eating disorder. It's actually a very small percentage of the population that actually develop eating disorders. It's a bit like other mental health problems. If somebody has, you know, depression, again, that actually has more genetics, but if somebody has something, it doesn't mean just by being around them, you're going to get it. That said, it could be a trigger if you are predisposed to having an eating disorder. And there's lots of things that predispose somebody to having an eating disorder. I don't know what Yael and Ashura think.
I would agree with what you just said, that sometimes, and I know lots of parents, I think with any sort of dysfunctional type of behavior, whether it be, you know, eating or restrictive eating or any other type of self-harming type of behavior, that if one is doing it within a friend group, then it's going to kind of like spread like wildfire. And what you said, Lisa, I think is very true. There's actually been studies done on this where they followed like groups of teenagers where they all started out on some, again, fad diet where, you know, they were eating only like an apple a day or something like that. And after like a day or two of this, you know, basically most kids have just kind of done away with that and just like, I can't do this. I don't like this. I miss eating. And really, it's a very small percentage, maybe like 1 to 2% of that group that actually then develops an eating disorder. And like you said, Lisa, there's predisposing factors, whether genetic or psychosocial factors that will make that type of behavior, this being the eating disorder, stick for that person, meaning it somehow addresses that need, that psychological need within them, that once they've started to restrict or whatever the eating style is, somehow that is like clicks into place in terms of meeting that need for them. But for most, it doesn't.
And even genetics, just to kind of follow on from that, there's lots of research being done nowadays to see if there is a genetic link with eating disorders. And the other thing that the reason why it's sometimes very hard to understand genetically versus whether it's something that people learn from their parents, because if you have a mother that's had anorexia, she's bringing a lot of those behaviors into the house. So it might not necessarily be genetic, but it might be something that I've learned because my mom has been like that. So again,
Right. Okay. A really practical question. What treatment options are available for those who can't afford private clinicians and services? I would love you guys to share if you're aware of, non-private, more public or, services besides, going to a private clinician.
So it obviously depends what stage we're talking about. If it's a very early stage, then like Lisa said, I encourage to go to the family doctor, kind of just get a feel of what's going on, things like that. There are eating disorder dietitians on the Coupa.
Okay.
Sometimes it does require.
and they're
Wait.
much better now. They're a lot of the Coupa have got like eating disorder specific units. They're really, really developing with their knowledge and their understanding. And it used to be that you could only see good people privately, but the Coupa are really trying to, I think, expand with that.
Mm-hmm.
Within like dietitians and nutritionists through the Coupa, they now have they specify what their subspecialties are. So it'll even say that there'll be someone that, a nutritionist or dietitians that work specifically with eating disorders through the Coupot.
Right. Now there are hospital units that are meant for eating disorders. There is a long waiting list to get onto them. The shortcut, don't tell anyone I said, is to go through the ER. Because if it's at a stage where the person needs to go to the ER to get immediate help, that's the shortcut.
Although the only thing I'm going to add to that, be very, very, very careful with that, because sometimes they just place the kid on a general ward, they stabilize them and they send them home. So that, I mean, I'm not sure that's always the most helpful way to get into an eating disorder unit.
Okay. Okay. What is best to help a tween girl who is overweight and wants to look different than she does? Might be repetitive, but I got the question, so I'm gonna ask it.
Way to help a tween girl who's not happy with the way she looks.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we did address this a bit in terms of one, finding that balance again of hearing and giving her space and that validity for not feeling good with how she looks, but again, trying to address what's healthy, and feeling strong and feeling able to do the activities that she wants to do. And if she's not able to, to find healthy styles of eating, healthy ways of finding physical good activities, doing it together with friends and with family. I think that, I feel like we've.
Yeah, and I would suggest, honestly, to go and see a dietitian. I think if you have a child that is generally, like, objectively overweight and is unhappy, again, obviously, every shape, you can start to tell a teenage kid that being big doesn't matter, and if they genuinely have a problem that their food is not great and they're not eating well, I think it would be really helpful to see a dietitian so that they can change their healthy eating rather than have to go into then like cutting out different foods and stuff like that. So I would address the issue as well and say, okay, what can we do to help you? And then I would try and use the dietitian to help me with that.
Okay. It's a little bit of a long question. I'm going to try and focus it. You see different types of eating disorders manifested in Israel than outside and other parts of the world? And would you also relate to more incidents of eating disorders in the observant versus secular communities?
Is there different eating disorders in Israel? Is that the question? Did you say?
The question was not, do you see a different type of eating disorders? Or
eating disorders are eating disorders wherever you are. Before I came to Israel, I worked in London for 7 years in an eating disorder unit. It's exactly the same. And actually, interestingly, I worked with like a lot of Arab population, which is quite similar from a lot of the Orthodox, the very Orthodox communities where they try and keep a lot of things in-house. But in terms of prevalence and the types of eating disorders, exactly the same everywhere.
And the world is so small, everything's online now.
Exactly.
Right. And what about you mentioned it briefly before. Do you see any differences between the more observant religious population, versus secular?
Besides wanting to keep it quiet and keep it in-house.
There's no difference in the actual etiology of the eating disorder. The eating disorder is exactly the same. Like if they were to all break their arms, everybody's looks the same. Well, it doesn't look the same, but they would,
Right.
It's just a matter of whether or not they would get help. I think that's the difference, or how they get help, or what help they get, basically.
Got it.
And by the way, actually, I think that's also changing a lot. And I think that from my experience, that people, especially in the very Haredi communities, there's more and more people that they're really trying to help people to get help with eating disorders, from what I've seen.
Okay. Any suggestions to deal with sneak eating, taking treats and candies, eating them in a room in excessive amounts?
Like binging, or?
That was the question, sneak eating, eating in excessive amounts in the room. I guess it could relate.
Sounds like binging.
It sounds like binging. I mean,
Yeah.
That sounds like they need to have a discussion about what's going on with them. That sounds like an eating disorder more than just hiding a snack.
That would definitely be like a warning sign, like you were referring to before, that type of behavior.
I'm gonna just say something a little different. Just maybe I would look at what this kid is eating the rest of the day. Like maybe they're just not eating enough. And sugar is the easiest way to get quick energy. So when kids are hungry, they'll grab sugar and candy because that gives them quick energy. So that's just something to keep in mind.
But not hiding it in their room. Again, this is the distinction. I agree. I think they would 100% eat terribly throughout the day. I wouldn't worry about that at all. I would have a discussion. But when you find stashes of papers and like candy wrappers and stuff in a room, that's a bit different, I think.
Right. Okay. We're coming to finish up. I'm happy to sort of just open up for like any last thoughts that you want to leave the session with.
Can I say one thing that Ashura commented on before? And I just, again, so Ashura is 100% right that cooking and being involved in food is really, really good, but that could also be a warning sign. And I think that that's something that I hear a lot from parents, that suddenly my daughter is obsessed with cooking and baking, and she's always in the kitchen and she's making cookies and she's doing this and she doesn't eat anything and she's constantly trying to give it to other people. That's one thing. And on the other side, she's obsessed with the oil that I'm using, and she wants to cook her own food, and she wants to do this with her food. And when I go shopping, I have to buy the low-fat yogurt. That is not helpful at all. And that's when I would encourage you to say no to your child, to cooking in the kitchen, basically. And I just wanted to do the flip side of what Ashura said, because it could be really positive, but that's also something I would look out for.
I feel like the real distinction there is she eating what she's cooking, or is she just feeding everyone else?
Yeah, agree.
Okay. Any last thoughts or comments? Okay, I think we're gonna end here. We did a lot, and we really touched upon a lot of things. Like you said, Lisa, this program could have been, for many hours. Obviously, I think the goal of this was to, offer some basic psychoeducation, some basic education to parents, not to solve everything or not to get to everything, to be able to give us, I think have parents feel more empowered in being able to relate to this, to think about it, And we hope that we hope that we accomplish that. We hope that we accomplish that. Okay, someone asked me one last question. I'm going to get it, and I'm going to finish with that. I have a feeling that this is something that was related to, but I think maybe it'll sort of, give some focus to the end of the night. We see so many columns in newspapers, websites that fad dieting. I know that you didn't speak about that. And slogans such as "Keep your daughter skinny during seminary" or "Want to lose weight for shidduchim." How do we combat this message being put into our teens' minds? Again, I think that it was related to, but maybe just how do we combat the really negative messages that are out there being put into people's minds? And we'll end with that.
You spoke about media training.
To what?
I
think it relates very much to what we were saying about the deception and the toxicity of the messages being sent out in social media. I mean, there's the media platform, and then there's also like the resumes of shidduchim where, you have to like include like your size that you wear in terms of your clothing. I think they're very related. And I think, I think of a bumper sticker when I was like growing up. There was a bumper sticker that was very popular. It was like, think globally, but act locally. Meaning that in order to address this very, very widespread, really significant problem in terms of what makes a person valuable, what makes a person, what makes a person attractive, meaningful, has to do, with size and with weight. The way to address that is to address it on an individual scale. So it's not like taking on the shidduchim system or taking on social media, but it's about having honest dialogue between a parent and a child about what really is their value, what midot, what tkunot are important in terms of the body is there to hold, the soul within, right? So it's about focusing on the beauty of within this package that can also be beautiful in lots of different shapes and sizes. That's my thought.
Okay. Any last thoughts about?
I'm just going to say, like, we have to check with ourselves before we go to, what other people are doing. Like, how do we describe someone? You're talking to your teenage daughter and you want to describe someone who you saw at a wedding. Oh, so-and-so sent you regards. I don't remember her name. How do you describe her? Do you say she's blonde, thin, tall? Like, how are you describing the person? Physically speaking, is that the way you're describing the person? She's beautiful, she's thin. Those type of words that you're using, that's what you're giving over.
And last thing that I would add is, at the end of the day, all the messages that you're reading on social media and in magazines, they are trying to sell something. And that is something that kids need to understand as well, that they are selling an ideal that does not exist. And if a child doesn't understand that, they shouldn't be using social media. And like, the diet industry is $1 billion industry for a reason, because it doesn't work. So there's always something better to try. So I feel like they need to understand it's not reality as well.
Okay, so Ashira, Yael, Lisa, thank you very, very much. Again, thank you to Mira. For people who are interested in getting to know Crossroads a little better, you can look in the chat and see our website. And everyone, have a wonderful night. I hope this was as meaningful to you as it was to me.
Good evening.
Bye.
Night, everyone.